All right, good morning. I want to welcome everyone to the March 16th MTS Board of Directors meeting. I'll ask clerk, please call the roll.
Chavez? Oh, can you speak into the mic, please?
Present.
Donovan?
Here.
Cardenas? Cardenas is absent. Fletcher? Goebel?
Here.
Leyba Gonzalez? Leyba Gonzalez is absent. Dillard?
Here.
Gastel?
Here.
Rodriguez? Rodriguez is absent. Frank?
Here.
Montgomery Steppe?
Here.
Elo Rivera? Elo Rivera is absent. Moreno?
Present.
Whitburn?
Here.
And the city of Santee is absent. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And member Elo Rivera is delayed at a previous meeting, but he will be en route and he will be joining us shortly. Let's go to item 2, public comment. Let me ask if we have any requests for non-agendized public communication this morning.
We have one, Alex Wong. Please unmute yourself now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, I'd like to wish a congratulations to Sandbag and MTS because the American Public Transportation Association's 2022 fourth quarter ridership report came out and the trolley ranked #1 in ridership, carrying more riders in 2022 than any other light rail system in America. I hear people say that no one rides transit in San Diego. Meanwhile, cities like Portland are praised for high transit ridership. But did you know that in 2019, the San Diego trolley had a per mile and total ridership rivaling Portland's Max Light Rail? Skeptics say it's time to stop investing in San Diego's transit because ridership recovery has plummeted. Yes, MTS ridership is still a bit below pre-pandemic levels due to bus driver shortages. Still, the trolley consistently enjoyed the strongest post-pandemic recovery among all American and Canadian light rail systems even before the Youth Opportunity Pass and even before the Midcoast trolley opened. MTS bus has also recovered stronger than its peers. Skeptics say mass transit can never succeed in San Diego due to low density. Greater Denver, despite having a population comparable to San Diego County, has a downtown with over twice as many jobs as downtown San Diego. Denver light rail stations also have more density surrounding them than trolley stations do. Yet, in 2019, the trolley alone, excluding the coaster or the sprinter, got more total ridership than Denver's light rail and Denver commuter rail combined and exceeded Denver light rail's per mile ridership. Pre-COVID, rail ridership in San Diego rivaled ridership in Denver and Portland, despite San Diego having less employment density and less transit-oriented development than Denver and Portland and not having a train to the airport, unlike Denver and Portland. During COVID, the trolley recovered faster than Denver and Portland even before the Youth Opportunity Pass and the Midcoast trolley. During COVID, MTS introduced 7.5-minute off-peak frequencies on the South Bay Blue Line, making it the single most frequent off-peak light rail service in America. During COVID, Sandag finished connecting the region's second largest university and employment center with downtown on time and on budget with fully grade separated light rail. Post-COVID, San Diego is building not one but two $4 billion infill mixed-use transit-oriented developments outside of downtown on the Green Line alone in the same planning area connected to the region's biggest university and biggest mall by the Green Line. Both TODs are bigger, denser, and more centrally located than anything Portland has or is building, and it's just the beginning. Avor is also on the Green Line and could be bigger than SDSU Mission Valley and Riverwalk combined and even denser and more centrally located. Post-COVID, San Diego is boosting employment density by building biotech labs, the kinds of employment space that can't be replaced by teleworks over downtown's biggest parking lots. Few, if any other transit systems in America are as resourceful, resilient, and as full of potential as the trolley. The Manhattan Institute studied 23 U.S. light rail systems and found that adjusting for each system's frequencies and station-adjacent density, the trolley had the highest per mile ridership in 2017. San Diego is the dark horse and the rising star of American transit.
Has expired. Chair, that concludes public comment.
All right, thank you. We're going to go to the items on consent. Let me ask any board members if they have any comments, questions on consent items they wish to pull. Not seeing any, I'll make a motion for approval of the items on consent. We have a second by member Whitburn. Are there any public speakers on consent?
We do not, Chair.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. That motion carries. We're going to go to our notice public hearing, Iris Rapid route. I will turn it over to Desmond and team for presentation. This is an action item requesting board approval.
Great, thank you and good morning. Dennis Desmond, Director of Planning. I'd like to start today by acknowledging Beverly Neff. She is our Senior Transportation Planner. This is her project. Unfortunately, she was unable to make it today, but she's done work tirelessly on this for the past 3 years. So I wanted to put that out there. Iris Rapid is a new rapid. It's actually the first rapid that we'll have in our system that was not in the Transnet ordinance. So all of the current rapid services in operation were planned and started and funded by Transnet. So this will be the first one that MTS has done in-house. We're very excited about it. It will also be our route with the first electric articulated buses, 60-foot buses that we have in our system. The first pilot bus is actually due to arrive tomorrow. So looking forward to that. It'll also include the overhead charging system to power these buses at our South Bay Division in Chula Vista. And we'll make some modifications to Iris Avenue Transit Center that I'll talk a little bit more about later. This route will replace our current Express Route 950, which operates between Otay Mesa Transit Center and the Iris Avenue Transit Center, but it'll have a higher level of service. So it'll cover everything that Route 950 does now and then more. So our project planning began in 2019. We received a TIRCP, Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program state grant to operate or to plan the service and for all of the capital costs for this service. A big part of that grant award was a robust public outreach program, and we brought on Kimley Horn, a consultant, to assist us in that effort. So throughout the fall of 2019, there was a very significant program to involve local communities, community-based organizations and residents and workers and riders in this effort. So this is a list of everything done on the left side during that time frame, and then on the right side, what we've done to. Oh, thank you. Oh, I didn't know everybody could see that. And then what we've done to publicize today's public hearing. So there's an image on the top left, top right part of the screen of one of our public meetings in Imperial Beach, and you will see the honorable, at that time, council member Paloma Aguirre from Imperial Beach, now mayor. So she attended our public hearing our public meeting in Imperial Beach. So a few things that exercises that we did with people that attended the public meetings and some things that we heard. We asked them to talk about where they were coming from and going to and how they use transit. So the map on the screen here just shows some of the dots that people put on where they live and then where they're going to and using transit to get to. We asked people to rank their travel priorities, what was important to them when they use a transit system, and corroborating our 20 years of planning work that we've been doing here at MTS. Everybody says that faster travel times is their most important priority. More frequent service comes in a close second, and I'm excited to report that this Iris Rapid project will do both. The map on the screen shows what we've come to as the Iris Rapid project. This is we had a lot of options that we took to the community to get their feedback on from both the alignment as well as where the stop locations were. And so this is the final result of that that's been in planning since then and is now in construction. So it starts at Otay Mesa Transit Center on the east, uses the 905 freeway with a stop at Caliente Avenue, and then a midpoint stop at the Iris Avenue Transit Center for transfers to multiple bus lines as well as the Blue Line trolley, and then continues to Imperial Beach with stops along Coronado Avenue and Imperial Beach Boulevard, with 2 stops out on Seacoast in Imperial Beach. Talking a little bit more about the capital side of this project, is $37 million. That was funded primarily through that TIRCP grant. There is some other money in there. There's some LC top money as well. And this includes the cost of the 12 electric buses. Again, part of that grant was the network integration phase, which included that outreach. And we also had Kimley Horn develop the operating plan, being a direct result of that outreach. Again, it includes those 12 60-foot articulated electric buses, as well as the charging infrastructure at the South Bay Division. We have improvements to bus stops, those stops that you see along the line on the previous slide. We have a new bus island at the Iris Avenue Transit Center. That's the image on the lower right portion of your screen. Just for reference, diagonally cutting through that image is the trolley line with the trolley station in the middle. Currently, all of our bus service is on the east side, where you see the bus loop on the right, upper right corner of that image. What's happening in the middle is the new bus island that we're building on the west side. That'll enable us to bring passengers in and out of the Iris Transit Center and make their blue line transfers without going over the tracks. And as you can see from the upper image, we do get congestion going across the tracks there now that the blue line is operating 7.5 minutes both directions all day. So that should save time for both our buses and obviously for our passengers making those transfers. We'll also be making some improvements to the existing bus island at the Iris east side, and we're adding a new traffic signal at 30th Street and Coronado Avenue. This is just an image of these buses. We are going to be, in addition to the freeway portion on the SR 95, we are going to be going through residential area in Imperial Beach. So they were really excited to hear that we're putting electric buses on this route because they are quieter and they don't have the tailpipe emissions. So we're hoping to launch this as early as September 2023. We're working again on the construction and bringing the buses in. And so September 2023 is our goal. Total route length is 13 miles with 10 stops along the way. We'll have those 12 electric buses in service. The frequency is going to be 15 minutes for most of the day. We're going to have a 7.5 minute peak overlay between Iris and Otay Mesa. So on the east side, and that's actually better than we have on the 950 right now. So that'll be an upgrade. And the most important thing about this is it's actually going to be bidirectional. So the current Express Route 950 operates westbound in the morning from the border and towards the border eastbound in the afternoon. So there's no bidirectional service. Folks have to use the local Route 905. So the Rapid 227 Iris Rapid will have bidirectional service. Operating costs are estimated to be about $4.5 million, and that's a net between the additional costs of the Iris Rapid as well as netting out the cost of the 950 Express. This is just an image of what the shelter, what the shelter structure looks like. And this is an illustration that Kimley Horn did that came out of the public outreach. When we brought this to the EC in February, Councilmember Moreno asked about the CBX. So I wanted to address that since it's not in the plan for the Iris Rapid. Just a little bit of background information. We did confirm that CBX does have a shuttle service that runs to the Santa Fe Depot, San Diego Airport, and San Isidro. That's operated by Mexicoach. However, there are options for MTS to serve this. If the board would like us to look at that, one is to extend our existing Route 909, which gets to about a half mile away from the CBX. That has a low cost, but 909 has a limited amount of service. We could implement a new route that would connect CBX to existing services in Otay Mesa, with a cost of about $1 million annually. And we can look at a new route that would connect CBX with Iris Avenue Transit Center. So we haven't done any detailed planning on this, but I wanted to put that out there as the options if the board wanted us to pursue a study of that. So the public hearing today, this is a requirement of Board Policy 42 for major service changes, including both the implementation of the Iris Rapid as well as the discontinuation of Route 950. We noticed the public hearing today via advertisements, bus stop postings, social media messages, and then Beverly herself spent 5 days at the Iris Avenue and Otay Mesa Transit Center talking to passengers on both Route 950, 905, and our 225 Rapid also. So folks that use transit in the area. There is a Title VI service equity analysis. That's a requirement of the FTA. That's attached to your agenda item, and that found no disproportionate impacts or disparate burdens identified for low income or minority communities. We did receive one comment in advance of today's public hearing. This comment wasn't actually addressing the recommendation, but it was relevant. This was somebody who was frustrated in not being able to go counter peak direction on the 950, and we're happy to report that the Iris Rapid will actually resolve that because it will have that bidirectional service. So with that, I am happy to recommend that we hold the public hearing and receive the public testimony today, and recommend approval of the Iris Rapid 227, as we will be marketing it. Not only implementing that as a pilot, but actually as a permanent route today, waiving the typical 12-month pilot period, and then discontinue Route 950. And that would happen simultaneous with the implementation of the Iris Rapid. So whenever Iris Rapid starts, that's when the 950 would go away.
All right, thank you, Dennis. Do we have any public speakers in this item?
Carolina Martinez, please unmute yourself now.
Good morning. My name is Carolina Martinez. All of you know that I work at Environmental Health Coalition, but today I'm speaking to you as a resident of Imperial Beach and someone that will definitely benefit from this project directly. It is very exciting. As you know, I am an advocate of frequency. Our office where I work, as you also know, is in National City, and I can't use transit to go to work. So this is a way that could potentially change that, and that is very exciting. So I just wanted to celebrate and congratulate the agency for advancing this project and knowing that it's going to be something that is immediately delivering outcomes to us, the future users. It's very exciting. That is a project that is not happening a million years from now either. So that is very exciting. So I'm here to support it, and thank you for the report.
Corina Contreras, please unmute yourself now.
Hello, my name is Corina Contreras. I am the Transportation Policy Advocate for Climate Action Campaign. This Iris Rapid is going to be transformational. It's definitely the type of transit moves that we need to see, not only here at MTS, but throughout the whole San Diego region. So I applaud staff and the board for moving in this direction. At the end of the day, folks need to be connected to different resources, whether that's the grocery store, employment centers, recreational activities. And as the cost of maintaining and owning a vehicle continues to go up, it continues to be less accessible for folks to utilize a vehicle. And the best thing for our communities is to be able to reduce vehicle miles traveled, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduce air pollution. So the fact that this is going to be a clean form of transportation is critical, especially in communities that for much too long have had the weight of air pollution and the social determinants of health that really affect good outcomes in life. So this is great. Thank you so much. And this is really going to meet people's needs. And I think whether you all decide to take a look at, connecting CBX or not, I think that's a great opportunity. And I'm excited to see if that's something that the board wants to do, because the more that we can connect our two bi-national region together, the United States and Mexico, the better it is for the current generation and future generations to come. Thank you so much.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you. We'll go to Member Moreno and then Member Donovan.
Thank you so much for the presentation, and I'm very excited for the launch of the Iris Rapid. I'm sorry. This provides a necessary east-west link in the South Bay between Imperial Beach and Otay Mesa Transit Center. Just in 2021, 2.1 million pedestrians crossed the border northbound at the Otay Mesa port of entry. Thousands of those commuters use our bus systems daily to get to jobs and education opportunities. And I do want to note that 2.1 million human beings crossing is during COVID, right? This is 2021. Iris Rapid is going to reduce emissions, speed up trips, offer better amenities, and provide longer spans of service. And this is the type of bus service that both the South Bay and Baja residents deserve. I also view the Iris Rapid as a further investment in the Blue Line, actually, as it will allow pedestrians crossing at the Otay Mesa Port of Entry to have two-stop rapid bus trips to access the Blue Line at the Iris Avenue Transit Center. Now, as the growth of the city of Tijuana moves more to the east, we can expect pedestrians crossing at Otay Mesa to increase. So this Iris Rapid route will allow MTS to capture more of those potential riderships instead of just bottlenecking them at the San Isidro Port of Entry. Also, Iris Rapid will also better connect the communities of District 8 to our local beaches at Imperial Beach. If you wanted to go from San Isidro High to the beach, you get on the Rapid at Caliente Avenue and be at Imperial Beach in only 7 stops. So that's pretty neat. I thank you for the slide on CBX. For folks that don't know CBX is the cross-border express. It's the bridge over to Tijuana's Rodriguez Airport. I would respectfully request that this board direct staff to explore more services or a potential service. Passenger volumes continue to increase at CBX. And in my opinion, there's currently no efficient public transit option to get to and from there. I don't want to overlook what a strong achievement the Iris Rapid is for MTS. I think there's a lot of grand plans these days for very expensive new transit lines. And if we could just construct these new lines decades in the future, that would be great, right? This potentially could be the great grandfather of a future line. But the Iris Avenue Rapid, I think, is a good example of a real improvement that could be made in a reasonable amount of time and has a concrete impact on people's lives right now. So thank you for pushing this project forward. The South Bay communities that I represent are very grateful for your hard work. We appreciate this. And I will move staff's recommendation. And if the body will entertain me with addition to explore CBX connectors for MTS staff to explore CBX connectors. Thank you, Chair. That concludes
Thank
my
you.
comments.
Yeah, so we have a motion to approve the recommendations. Second by Member Gastil with the instruction to staff that those 3 options presented, let's further explore those and report back when appropriate. Member Donovan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just curious, what's the benefit of waiving the policy 42 1-year trial period?
So ordinarily, when we implement a new route, it is in policy 42 listed that it would be a pilot route. However, in this case, because we're making a $37 million capital investment and it has been in the planning for 3 years, in my mind, we can be confident enough that this is going to be a successful route. And because it's actually replacing a route that's already successful, I don't think that we need to come back and have the board actually make this permanent in a year. That's of course your prerogative, but typically that would be for a new route that we are not sure of whether it's going to be successful or not. But in this case, I think that we have that confidence that this is going to be.
And Dennis, in those
successful route.
cases where we're trying something out, we wouldn't be making a $37 million investment.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Well, and in addition, we actually got the TIRCP grant based on the fact that we were going to operate the route. So we have to operate the route. And for what, 3 to 5 years, something like that?
I believe it's at least 3 years, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I want to remind you of this because the next item is going to talk about our budget deficit. So we did go after this grant well before the pandemic impacted us.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious. So it saves you guys having to come back to the board in a year and saying, yeah, this is a good idea.
And we're certainly happy to report on the success of it.
I was
Yeah.
just curious how the process
Just wouldn't
worked.
require a board action.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a good question. Thank you. All right, not seeing any other, there you go, Member Chavez.
I just want to emphasize how important this is for our binational community. There's a wait time right now of 3 to 4 hours when it's good on Ped East, which is going northbound every single morning. And I don't know if you know, but Ped West is open from, I think it's 6 a.m., 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. just for this workforce. We have a lot of people commuting northbound every single day and southbound every single day. And I think this would open a great opportunity to cut this wait time, because can we imagine the human value of being 4 hours in the line and Petty's just to get the trolley and the Blue Line trolley? Just the workforce, the students, everyone that needs to get across, we're one region basically, right? We are a sustainable city. We have good affordable prices. We can't compare ourselves with others, states in the country like New York or San Francisco that became so inaccessible. And when we talk about not having also affordable housing, we have people going southbound to look for solutions of housing. And this is the great workforce that we have every single day commuting. And when we open this Otay Mesa line, I think it's going to make wonders for the wait times. 4 hours in the line to cross, plus the 8-hour work shift, and sometimes 2 or 3 hours to go back home. I think it's just inhumane. This is a big step forward, and I do support Councilmember Moreno's initiative to explore CBX, because when we're talking about people going to the Tijuana airport, we're talking about thousands of pounds of pollution that we're getting off the road. And still, CBX is a great facility, but a lot of people still choose, because they don't have public transportation to the CBX, they choose to go to Tijuana. So I think it's a great initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion by Member Moreno, seconded by Member Gastel. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries unanimously. We're going to go to our next action item, our last action item. Then we have a series of informational items. Fiscal year 23 operating budget mid-year amendment. This request is for board approval, and I will turn it over to Mike and team for the presentation.
Good morning, Mike Thompson. I'm the Director of Financial Planning and Analysis. I'm joined by Gordon Meyer, who's our Operating Budget Supervisor, and we're going to present our proposed FY23 operating budget amendment. We usually review the assumption changes. We're looking at our revenue assumption changes on the subsidy side. We're reducing our federal revenues by $255,000 in this proposed amendment. That is primarily due to changes in our operating reimbursement on our rural services, a little less service. So we're expecting a little less reimbursement for that. So that is that reduction. For Transportation Development Act, or TDA, this is a sales tax funded revenue source. So we are seeing growth in the sales tax receipts for TDA, but TDA is governed by a claim process with the county and Sandag. So we're not making any changes to our claim. So we will get our original budget amount, even though we are seeing some good sales tax numbers on that side as well. But so there's no change there. Transnet, we get two sources of Transnet. One is formula funded. So it's based on the actual receipts coming into the region. Sandag revised their regional target up by about 5% year-over-year growth, which was higher than we initially planned. So no matter what this revenue ends up being, whatever receipts come in the door, we get our percentage share of this pot of money. So right now we're projecting that to be about $1 million more than what was originally planned in fiscal year 23's budget. The other type of Transnet we receive is free reimbursement. We get reimbursed for the Transnet projects on the BRT side and also on the Mid-Coast side. And that is the overall cost of those projects, less the fare revenues. The net cost is funded by Transnet. So this is our first real year of running Mid-Coast. So we had some little bit favorable expense on side and also unfavorable on the ridership side on Mid-Coast versus what was originally projected this time last year. So we are expecting about $1 million more in Transnet operating reimbursement as well. So in total, we're seeing subsidy revenues increase by $1.7 million in this proposed amendment. Moving on to passenger fare revenue, and let me just talk you through the chart here on the right. So we have a number of lines on here. This blue line at the top is our sort of historical pre-COVID baseline. This maroon line at the bottom is last year's actuals. And you can see the dip here in September was free ride month when we launched Pronto. Otherwise, you can see fairly steady growth after Pronto going through the rest of the fiscal year. And then the green line here is what we adopted for the budget. And then the orange overlay of that is the actual so far this year through January. You can see we've been running fairly close to the original plan for the first 7 months of the year. We're actually right on top of that number. We're just barely slightly ahead for 7 months over the original plan. So we're basically keeping that budget fairly flat. It ends up being about $500,000 more with our projection for the rest of the way. And we are also projecting continued growth through the rest of the fiscal year, as you can see on the chart. But still sort of keeping that gap between 22 and 23, that steady growth year over year throughout the rest of this year. While the revenue number is very close, there is some underlying variances in there. Ridership is well ahead of plan. We're about 10% ahead of budget on the ridership side and over 20% growth year over year on the ridership side, due to just continued growth as well as the first full year of Midcoast and also the youth opportunity ridership growth in 18 and under. So we're seeing ridership growth, but the revenue is actually at plan. So that means our average fare per passenger is much lower than what we budgeted. It's about 8% lower. So while we're close to budget, we're seeing a mixed message there a little bit. So moving on to our revenue summary, again, passenger revenue, $500,000 or 0.7% increase projected. On the other operating revenue, there's a number of items in that line. We're only projecting an $80,000 increase or 0.4%, but there's a lot of moving pieces there. We are having very strong advertising revenue on our revenue vehicles. We also have very strong interest income on our balances with the rising Fed rate. That is all being offset by our energy credit revenue. We get energy credits through the federal programs and state programs on both sides. The rates for those credits, the price for those credits are very much depressed at this point in time. On the state side alone, last year we were about 140. Now we're in the $70 range. So we had to back that down for the rest of this fiscal year. And that's a decrease of over $3 million. So overall it nets out, but there is lots of moving pieces underneath that. Then we talked about subsidy being 1.7 million. So in total, we're projecting the revenue to increase by 2.1 million or 0.6%, with this amendment. Before moving on to the expense changes, I want to talk about service levels because it really drives a lot of the expense assumptions. We are reducing service levels across all modes with this proposed amendment. On the trolley side, it's basically a very slight decrease in what we initially planned. The revenue miles is a little bit different than what initially planned, with basically trying to factor in our full year of Midcoast. So we have that much more dialed in. It's just a very slight decrease. On the bus fixed route side, on the chart is actually here is the red is FY22 actual, the green is the original budget, and this purple is the amended budget. So you can see on the fixed route side, we are decreasing the revenue miles fairly significantly at mid-year. And these are all the service changes we've had to do over the last 6 to 12 months as a result of staffing shortages. So we've continued to reduce those schedules, basically keeping those levels flat for the rest of the fiscal year, the service on the street today. And that is a reduction from our original plan due to our staffing shortages. So that is built into this budget as well. On the paratransit side, our ridership on the paratransit side is all demand-based. It's not a schedule type thing. It's basically whatever demand is, the service we put on the street. And that demand has been less than what we planned originally. We try to plan this service, be a little bit more conservative with what the service we're planning because it's a very expensive service to run. And it's just easier to take money back at mid-year than try to add money in a normal year. So we are decreasing that versus the original budget by about 20% based on the demand we're seeing for the first 7 months and we're projecting out for the next 5 months. So that's going to ripple through all the expense line items. So on the personnel side, we are basically staying flat. It's a $125,000 increase or 0.1%. But we're seeing a large reduction in our regular wages, basically due to staffing shortages across the agency on all sides of operations. So that is being reduced, but it's being being offset by overtime wages. We're covering all those shifts generally with overtime to keep everything running as normal. So we are seeing a large increase, almost a 20% increase in our overtime costs for this fiscal year, or $1.7 million. So that's how you get to basically flat on the wage line. We are proposing a couple position table changes with this mid-year amendment. We had 2 FTE additions approved by the board back in October. We're proposing another 2.5 FTEs with this amendment. One is a dispatch supervisor in transit enforcement. We need another service person in rail facilities, a transit safety specialist, and a part-time intern in the stormwater department. And that is being offset by a reduction of one ridership surveyor. We have an open position that we just don't plan on filling. So we're going to remove that from the budget. And we also made a presentation change in the position tables. We have our customer service, passenger service reps that are on the platform, on the trolley system primarily. We've always budgeted them at a 0.2 FTE, but it's more like 0.5 FTE. We're just adjusting the head counts accordingly. We've always budgeted this as a pool of hours, but it's not really 0.5 FTEs. It's just a bucket of hours we plan on using. There's no budget impact. It's just a presentation change on that side. Also in personnel, our fringe benefit budget is increasing by about $1 million or 1.5%. We have some savings on the pension side of about $600,000 or less than 2%. We're also seeing savings on the healthcare side of about $1 million. On the healthcare side, we have trusts for the IBEW and ATU that we've been disbanding over the last year. And there's some additional savings not planned for this year that weren't planned that are happening this year. And then that'll go away and put them all on regular health plans going forward in FY24. So that will change, bounce back up next year. And then a big change on this line really is in workers' compensation claims and payment costs. That's increasing by $1.6 million and really is the overall driver in this line for these increases. Big change for this budget is purchase transportation. It's decreasing by $5.6 million or almost 6% decrease. And this is all due to the service level changes we talked about. We have three main pieces of this purchase transportation budget. First is TransDev, which operates our South Bay and East County divisions. So those service level reductions are about $5.1 million, and that's being partially offset by increased costs there through the changes to the contract in December to give more pay to the frontline workers. We also did the same thing on the first transit contract. We changed amended the contracts in December to increase pay for the frontline workers. So that is built into these numbers, but we are also seeing savings there as well because of reduced service. So it really offsets everything. The service levels are offsetting everything for this current fiscal year, I should say. Other outside service budgets increasing are security. It's increasing by about $1 million. Again, this was another contract amendment that was approved last month by the board for our frontline personnel. Repairs and maintenance costs are decreasing by $3.1 million or almost 30%. We had a couple of very large projects planned for this fiscal year 23 on the trolley side. And based on the timing, it looks like most of those expenses are going to happen in FY24. So we backed that out of this year's budget and we'll be putting back into next year's budget. And we've had favorable experience on our engines and transmissions line. So you can see about a $300,000 savings there. And then about a $300,000 savings on other outside services. This is primarily our PRONTO operations and maintenance costs, as we talked about, as Gordon has talked about a number of times. We planned on those operations costs hitting the budget in July, and they actually didn't start until January. So we did have some savings there. The big mover at mid-year is energy. And you've heard a lot about this on the monthly reports, but this is going to be an over $8 million increase or almost 20% increase. It's all due to the cost of natural gas. And so we put this chart on the bottom of this slide, and you can see over here on the left side of the chart, this little line here, very sort of level. It's basically at about $3 for a decatherm back in this time frame. And if you went 10 years farther back, it'd always be about $3. It bounces up and bounces down, but it's always bouncing around a $3 average. So and then last year, around this time with the war in Ukraine, we started seeing higher prices as more fuels being shipped to Europe. And then that sort of died down for the rest of the nation over the course of this winter, but in California directly, the storage levels and the incoming pipelines to California have had lots of issues. And you can see this giant spike that was in the news a lot for SDG&E. So that is how bad it was. I mean, we're at $3. This is $50. So it's totally unprecedented. We did see better numbers in February, bringing it back down, but it was still $13, which is still a horrible number. But we did get very good news from March. It's under 7. So we're hoping that comes very back to normal, especially into next year, bringing that back to normal. But most of this has already happened. So we're seeing large cost increase related to this, especially in January alone, giant number. So we're increasing that natural gas budget by about $5 million, but that also impacts our electricity as well, because almost all electricity is generated from natural gas. Those prices move together. So we're projecting $3.3 million increase in electricity for the trolleys as well. So overall, again, $8.3 million, almost 20% just in energy for this current fiscal year. We've talked about most of this. Material supplies is also increasing by about $1.3 million or almost 9%. That is just supply chain costs of parts for our revenue vehicles primarily. We are offsetting that somewhat in risk management. We're projecting lower claims costs and lower legal costs on our risk side for this current fiscal year. So in total, we're projecting right now about $2.1 million increase in expenses or 0.6% increase in expenses for the mid-year amendment. So rolling this up, $2 million increase in revenues, $2 million increase in expenses. So they offset each other. And we had a $37.3 billion structural deficit coming into this year. We're basically at the same place right now, $37.3 million structural deficit. Even with all the moving pieces, we are at the same spot, largely because service has been reduced so dramatically. We use that. We balance our structural deficit with stimulus funding every year. And the way the reimbursement works on the federal side, this is about 5 months of eligible expenses that we draw to cover our deficit. So that leaves 7 months of eligible expenses that we haven't been drawing because we are saving the stimulus funding to balance future operating deficits. Well, there's been some talk at the federal level with the negotiations on the debt limit about taking back stimulus funding that hasn't been spent yet. And that is sort of unprecedented. They talked about, in the past, they've talked about taking back funding that wasn't obligated, but we've obligated all of our funds, but now they're talking about unspent. So sort of around that as we're exploring and drawing the full 12 months worth of expenses and putting those excess revenues into a reserve. We're just looking at that. And for example, if we drew 12 months expenses, we could draw about $87 million of federal dollars. And then we could put that in a reserve for future fiscal years and do the same thing, still balance our deficits as long as we can with this funding, but just sort of pocket that money and then earn some interest on it as well with interest rates so high. So that's something we're exploring. So we reflected on this slide here and put that in the recommendation. Really quickly talking about this, and we'll talk more about this in the next presentation, but we strive to balance our recurring expenses with recurring revenues. So that is always the goal. But our revenue growth has not been keeping pace with our expense growth. We've had a number of contract amendments, a number of CBA amendments to increase expenses, and revenue is not keeping pace. Ridership and passenger revenue are still well below pre-pandemic levels years later. So that's a concern. We put this chart together that shows the $37 million deficit for the current year. We're projecting about $50 million. Again, we'll talk about that more in the next presentation. And if that steadily stays there, we'll run out of deficit stimulus funding in middle of fiscal year 27. So it's not that far away that it'll be gone. And then even a few years after that, we'll have Transnet issues as well. We won't be getting our 400% reimbursement for our Transnet funded routes at that point because there won't be enough Transnet coming in the door of that type of money to pay for all of our Transnet routes. So that will be adding to deficits in the early part of the next decade. We just wanted to bring that forward to you as well. So with that, it brings me to the staff recommendation is that the MTS Board of Directors enact Resolution 23-02, amending the fiscal 23 operating budget for MTS, San Diego Transit Corp., San Diego Trolley, Contract Services, and the Ferry, and also direct staff to accelerate the draws of federal stimulus funding and create an operating deficit reserve with this excess funding for use in future fiscal years. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any public speakers?
We do. Karina Contreras, please unmute yourself now.
Yes, hello. My name is Karina Contreras, Transportation Policy Advocate for Climate Action Campaign. It's a difficult situation. Taking a look at a massive structural deficit, and there's kind of these ongoing themes. There's a theme of not having enough bus operators, but I haven't seen any numbers indicating X amount of bus operators are needed, and this is our plan to get there. then there's this other theme of not enough ridership, and that it's not above pre-pandemic levels. But then there's also this theme of reducing service. So it's critical for folks to be able to have reliability, or else we are never going to be able to get more ridership if folks can't rely on public transit. So something needs to be done where we continue to grow ridership, and we continue to grow the number of full-time employees needed to provide that type of ridership, because revenue growth is going to happen with more ridership. So it's just a little disappointing. We're never going to get to our climate goals as a region if we don't put our public transit in a better position to connect folks to the places that they need to go in a reliable and quick fashion. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best of luck with this discussion.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you. Go to our colleagues. We'll start with Member Montgomery Step.
Thank you very much, Chair Fletcher. Thank you for the presentation. I do support what we have to do with the federal stimulus funds to cover that structural deficit that we are seeing year over year, and also appreciate answering my staff members' questions just about the driver shortage, but also about passenger revenue and fare box recovery, and how those two how do they coexist? So I just want to ask that again, just to get clarification about those two, the relationship between those two variables.
So passenger revenue, fare box recovery is basically passenger revenue divided by the expenses for the operate the services. So we are now at about 20% fare box recovery for our operating service. We used to be in the 40% range in FY19, FY18. So that's the difference there.
And if passenger revenues, meaning fares that we collect, don't go up at the same percentage each year as we increase our operating costs, then the fare box recovery goes down because it is a ratio of the two together.
Right. Okay. So I've mentioned this in several meetings, previous meetings, but I would just strongly encourage staff to research the status of the Transportation Development Act Reform Task Force. In 2018, State Assembly in the Senate, Transportation Committee chairs, one from San Jose and one from Antioch, asked the California Transit Association to establish a task force. And some of the expectations of the task force were to review TDA's performance measures, such as fare box recovery challenges, and to develop legislative recommendations for any reforms or changes to the current programs the task force chooses to recommend by 2020. So in essence, this was looking for reform and ways to relieve some of the stress from the California transit operators. And I know that we are listed as a member of the task force. So I think it would be a really good opportunity to build on that discussion in a subsequent meeting, just so we can get the status update of what has been discussed there. So I will move this item, but I would also like to add to the motion that that staff present a standalone item regarding the Transportation Development Act Reform Task Force at a future meeting.
Happy to second that. So we have a motion by Member Montgomery Step, seconded by myself, to adopt the recommendations, adding the amendment to bring back a presentation at a subsequent board meeting on the task force outline. Member Bush?
Yeah, just a couple of general, questions for staff. And I do agree with the caller, Ms. Contreras, some of the comments she was making about, I think it would be useful to have the number on the driver shortages. Maybe I missed that, but what the raw number is, how far behind on that. So do we have that figure handy? Did I miss that?
Mike Weigand, I think you know what our shortages are in-house so far. You should come to the
Our budgetary
staffing count for in-house operators is 540, and we are short 67 in-house operators. On the Transdev contracted side for fixed route, it's almost a very similar number. They have a larger number to start with, but they're short roughly 68 operators as of this morning.
So if I did my math right, what is that, about a 12% vacancy, if you will, or shortage, or
No, I think the shortage is pretty close to what we cut in service, right? So it's, okay. Go ahead.
We cut it roughly 9% of service, I believe.
how does that compare to the regular levels?
And then
How does the driver shortage right now? What I'm trying to figure out is how bad it is now compared to, just historical trends or standards.
for today, to meet today's service standards, those numbers I gave you, I'm sorry, I should have put that caveat to it, are pre-COVID levels to restore service to full capacity. For today, on the service reduction that we have on the street today, we're basically flush. In-house has got enough to put standbys. We're covering it. Some overtime, obviously, but we're trying to continue to hire. We have 13 operators in some form of training today to get us, trying to bring on more operators as we move closer so we can restore service hopefully in June, September, or even next January. On the contracted side, they have quite a few more operators in. They got a little bigger gap to go, but they're 4 short from today's current service levels. So they need more overtime or some level of callback to cover today's service.
Understood. So I think what concerns me is, for me, it's the service level cut, as the caller mentioned, is that we cut service and it's often necessary to do, but that does hurt our long-term efforts to attract ridership. And so we want to make that a last resort. So the majority of the service, so is it fair to say that the majority of the service cuts have been because of the driver shortage? Is that fair to characterize it?
The only one, so the commuter express buses on the I-15, those ones are really low in ridership. Those ones were ones we made a pretty significant cut because of COVID. Those are really office workers that aren't coming into the office, or at least not taking transit to come down to the office. So we have not increased that at the same level that we have the rest of our fixed route bus service. But the cuts, so that's the one caveat. The rest of the cuts are based on driver shortages.
Yeah.
Okay, and my final question is, so the cuts to service, about where generally has that been distributed geographically, or how do we cut service? And I can speak from, my experience, and I live in National City and have access to the bus, and I've noticed it's been really long wait times, much longer than usual. And as a result, now I just don't take the bus as much because it's not reliable. So how is that distributed, those cuts?
I'll call Dennis up. He can explain to you how we decided which routes to cut back. And a lot of those wait times you may have been referring to could have been missed service because we didn't have a driver to run that service. And that's what we want to avoid. That's the worst. Your story is exactly what we're trying to avoid.
Thank you. The cuts have really been across the board. Our intention was to make them as minor as possible. So rather than doing a major cut on a few routes, we actually cut a little bit off of everything. So to hopefully reduce the impacts.
Got it. Thank you.
Embryolo Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. This has been an ongoing conversation since I joined the board. And becoming more real by the day as the dollars that helped bridge the gap can no longer be depended on. That does leave us with some tough potential decision points. We've discussed in previous meetings the possibility of exploring other revenue opportunities to potentially address some of the shortfalls that we see here. So non-fare revenue opportunities, I would very much like to see us get really serious about beginning to explore. Whether, again, I've mentioned this on a multitude of occasions, but I'll say it again, whether that means corporate sponsorships, digital advertising space, trying to max out what we're bringing in from a revenue perspective that, doesn't first fall on the backs of our riders. So with that, you're open to it, Council President Pro Tem and Chair, I can add a.
Well, I'll just note item 14 is an entire discussion on that topic.
Yeah, I was going to ask for kind of a strategy. I mean, I'm happy to wait. I was going to ask for,
We can add it here too.
yeah, just to like kind of put it in action.
Yeah.
So we're beginning to have the conversation about potential forms of revenue and then the potential for bringing forward a strategy. So if you all are open to it,
Sure.
directing staff to bring forward a strategy for additional non-fare revenues.
I'm okay. You okay? Good. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right. So we have a motion by member Montgomery staff, seconded by myself to adopt the recommendations in item 13 with the amendment around a presentation on task force and the amendment from member Elo Rivera around developing strategy for non-fare increased revenue opportunities. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries. We're going to go to item 14, an informational item, but this is really at the heart of member Elo Rivera's recent point around thinking about fiscal year 24 operating budget, what the options are, what the opportunities are as we work. We've got this structural deficit. We have a little bit of runway to bridge, but it's time in fiscal year 24 budget that we as a board get serious about some real concrete steps for how we're going to smooth this glide path and get back to a strong financial situation, recognizing that those excess funds will not always be there to draw down. And so really important discussion. I'll turn it over to Mike for presentation and discussion.
Okay, this is the presentation we presented to the Budget Development Committee a couple of weeks ago. It's a very high level look at FY24. We're in the middle of developing that budget from the ground up, and we'll bring that back to the Budget Committee in a couple of weeks. But this was the first pass at FY24 with basically the known things we know at this point in time. Starting with our revenue assumptions. On the subsidy side, we're not going to see much growth in sales tax receipts for the next fiscal year. These are projected by SANDAG. It affects both TDA and our Transnet formula funding. So right now, SANDAG is projecting 1% growth in regional Transnet funding. So that will be 1% growth in our little formula share of that as well. They're projecting 3.3% growth in TDA regional receipts. So that is a little bit higher because our claim was based on a little bit lower number. So that 3% year over year is a little bit higher of a number than the 1% growth because we're going from claim amount to a new claim amount on the TDA side. But also on the TDA side, TDA is one of our revenue sources that we share between capital and operations. And there's a formula about how much federal we have in capital, how much match we need for that goes hand in hand. And with this next capital that we'll present in a couple of weeks to the Budget Committee, there's higher federal funding in the capital budget. So we need more match on the TDA side. So we've just kept our same formula in place, and that's going to mean less money in the operating budget for next fiscal year based on this latest projection. Our Transnet operating reimbursement, our other bucket of Transnet, that should grow as cost increase gets factored into the next year's rates. So we'll see some growth there. We built that into this projection. We're working on those numbers now. State Transit Assistance, or STA, is another funding source where we share between capital and operations. We've always just kept about $11 million in the operating budget and put the remainder in capital because this has been a very volatile revenue source. And if we have changes, we don't want to change the operating budget typically because that means service. So we'd have any changes sort of flow through capital side. So we're keeping that static assumption in place. And then the federal side for the operating budget, we can put in preventive maintenance costs. We can federalize preventive maintenance costs basically and put those federal dollars in the operating budget. And we project overall cost increases of about $1 million on our preventive maintenance activities that we'll be able to add to the operating budget that way on the federal side. And as always, we're balancing our structural deficit with our stimulus funding at the end of the day. Our passenger revenue assumption. So we talked about this chart in the last presentation, and this orange line now is our new forecast. And this green line above it is what we're forecasting for next fiscal year. So we've sort of just mirrored the same growth that we had for this current 23 versus 22, and just sort of added that on to next year and see continued growth. Because we have had very steady growth for the last 18 months. Very, it's slow, but it is very steady growth. So we're just sort of for our first pass, projecting that out. Having that happen would be about an $8 million increase in revenue. We should have February's numbers here very soon. So hopefully that's tracking with our current budget. And then we hope we'll have March's numbers before we have to finalize our forecast for fiscal year 24. So hopefully we continue to see those same trends, and then we can bank on some additional growth, at least on the passenger revenue side. So next, I want to talk about service levels. We have our first pass of service levels on the trolley side. So the chart is now 22 actual, purple is the amended budget, and this blue is the forecast for FY24 at this time. Trolley is basically very, very slightly increasing due to leap day next year, but otherwise it's the same level of service. Bus fixed route, we are planning on increasing service levels, and we've changed all the operator pay structures, both internally and externally, over the last 6 months or so. So we're expecting that to really produce results, and then have not only increased operating and hiring, but increased retention of our operators as well. That will allow us to restore the service over the next year, and hopefully by next January, we're back to our baseline service levels. That's what we've built in to this draft of the budget. That would be 5% increase in our fixed route budget next year. Still not quite FY22's actual levels, because we're only restoring it in the middle of the year. And it also does reflect the additional service for the Irish Rapid as well. Paratransit is always a hard one to forecast because it's 100% demand based. So we are going to forecast it going back up to sort of where the original 23 budget was. At some point that demand is going to come back. And when it does, we want to have the budget there ready for it. So we are putting that budget back up again to FY23's original levels. So all this will ripple through the expense assumptions. Some other known numbers at this point, again, operator hours will increase as a result of the service additions. We'll also have the full year at the new rate structure for those operators as well. So that's built into this assumption. As at this point in time, we only had 5 increases in headcount. It's all in our construction safety flag person. There's, again, it's a number, but we have about 60 employees in this group, and there is high turnover in this group as well. So we just want to have a bigger pool to sort of help manage that turnover. So we're asking for a little bit increase there. Wage rate increase assumptions are as follows. We have collective bargaining agreements in place for all of our negotiated bargaining unit employees. Those increases range between 3.25% and 4.25% over for next fiscal year. For our non-bargaining unit employees, we're assuming the same merit pool, 4% that we have for the current fiscal year, and the same percentage performance incentive program as the current fiscal year of 1%. On the fringe benefit side, our healthcare brokers told us to predict higher than normal increases. Normally, we try to stay without a 5% increase year over year, and they told us to predict maybe 10 to 12%. So we're put a 10% increase with this first forecast. Our pension costs are already known at this point. San Diego Transit side, we approved that actuary plan last month. That's a known number. It's $1 million increase. And the CalPERS actuaries are also, those plans are also approved. That's about an increase of $1.2 million. So those increases are built in as well. On the purchase transportation side, we know those rates now, though those contract rates are between 3% and 4%. Based on the amended numbers, but we'll have a full year of those amended numbers for next year as well. And then we'll also have increased service levels on both fixed route side and the paratransit side. That'll be built into that budget as well. So we see large increases there, primarily due to the increased service levels. Other outside services, as we talked about savings in FY23 from some rehab projects, that is basically going to go into FY24. So we see increases there because of stuff that sort of flowed from year to year. And then we also will have a full year of Pronto operations maintenance costs next year versus only a half year in the current fiscal year. Energy, we have a very preliminary number in here. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on energy side. We'll have to add some additional volumes for that add service, but overall we expect natural gas to be cheaper next year on the whole. So we should have savings on the energy line because that will impact not only natural gas, but also the electricity side. So we're continuing to watch that. We should get a couple more months of actual data before we have to finalize this budget, but we should hopefully see some relief on the energy side in next year's budget. And another area known that we know about is our risk and liability insurance costs. They are dramatically increasing as well. So we've built that into this first draft because we know those numbers now. So rolling it all up, this is what it looks like. We have about a $9 million increase in operating revenues. Most of that is passenger revenue, but we hopefully will have some other operating revenues increasing as well. Our subsidy, our non-operating revenues is only increased by $1.7 million. There's not a lot of growth there at all. That's less than a 1% increase. Expenses with this first forecast are increasing by $27 million or almost 7%. Now that is partially service driven, but it's also, just underlying cost increases as well that's built into that number. And that's also being helped by some significant savings on the energy side because energy is so high in fiscal year 23. So that number should be a little bit worse, but energy is so bad in 23 that actually 7% is not even terrible. So based on that preliminary assumption, we have a $53 million structural deficit going into next year. And again, we're working on this now and we'll be bringing better numbers back next month.
So we don't want to bring you the bad news without talking about our available options. When you look at our service cuts that we had to make due to driver shortages, that could be something we froze so that, over time, the passengers are used to it by now and you could freeze that. That's not a significant amount of money. We did about that almost 9% cut. But that would be something that if we were to freeze that and not assume that we're going to add it back in for the FY24 budget, it would kind of string out a little bit more the CARES Act money that we can subsidize or backfill our deficit with. The biggest way we could save money in the future to address this budget deficit is certainly to cut service. This would look like about a 26% reduction in the bus service in order to backfill this $50 million structural deficit. Huge, huge impact to our bus ridership. We could enforce the current fare policies more stridently. Currently, we're projecting we're losing about $8 million because of our enforcement policies. We could step up enforcement and require everyone who's riding to actually pay their fares. So that would be a change that we could, again, try to address things earlier rather than waiting until we hit that fiscal cliff. Raising the cost of fares. That's always something that transit agencies look at. The New York MTA is trying to address their big structural deficit, certainly a bigger one than we have, and theirs is more imminent. They originally wanted to propose a huge fare increase, and the legislature said, no, instead we want to come up with a better way to structure this, their state legislature. So that was in recognition that raising fares is going to harm the people that you least want to harm, who can't afford the transit service. We can defer capital investments. A lot of transit agencies over the years have done this. If you look at the Washington Metro, for instance, a lot of their unsafe practices were caused by a long-term unfunding of their state of good repair projects. So that is always something that transit agencies have done. We do not believe that is appropriate at this point, but I did want to mention that we do put money into capital. We could seek relief from some of the state mandates that we're getting. The Innovative Clean Transit actually did provide for off-ramps in the event that an agency, in order to cover the costs of that program, had to cut service or raise fares. We could petition the state and say, look, we don't want to cut all this service. Currently, I believe we have about $66 million in our capital program coming forward that addresses the transition to zero emission bus. A ballot measure in 2020, we were all set to go to the ballot to help us increase service and really provide that next level of transit system that we all wanted to see. It's hard to message that when you're saying we're going to build into that some way to cover a structural deficit, but it is certainly an option that we have. We have the ability to do that. Now I want to talk about state and federal assistance. I'll start with the federal. You know, the federal side has only really looked at how to increase and stimulate the economy through increasing investments in capital projects. So it doesn't really address the operational needs of the transit agencies. And so that in recognition, the Biden administration has instructed states that they should use some of the flexible dollars that have come to them through the Infrastructure Act to try to help those agencies within the states to address operating dollars. But it was not a mandate, and it's certainly up to the state. So now I'm going to talk about the state. And I have a slide here because I'm chairing a subcommittee of the California Transit Association that has been working collaboratively throughout the state to try to come up with ideas on what we could do and ask for from the state. Certainly the flexibility in the TDA fare box recovery ratio is something that we've always been petitioning the state for. That doesn't really give us any money. What it does do is allow us to continue to get the Transportation Development Act monies that we currently get because they, over the course of the pandemic, have waived that requirement to meet a certain threshold of fare box recovery. But instead, what a lot of sources have been pointed out, and especially in the Bay Area, who's in a much more challenging situation than we are, because their ridership has not come back, their fare revenue has not come back. We've been looking at a bunch of different sources. The ones we've thrown up here are the ones that they're talking about as the committee has been trying to work together. As you can see, these are all going to cause some people to be in opposition. I'll say some of the things, for instance, the state highway account, the Bay Area is very keen on seeing that be diverted to transit. But we know that there's a lot of people and organizations and regions that would be opposed to that. So we put all these out here on the slide, but then I have to report to you that yesterday the subcommittee for the Assembly State Budget had a meeting, and our California Transit Association Executive Director was on a panel with others, and they were talking, and the chair of the Assembly Budget Committee came in, and I have to report that it was a very strident conversation, and it was, to paraphrase somewhat, it's transit agencies haven't demonstrated they have thought about what it's like to sustain their operations. Transit agencies haven't made any difficult decisions and shouldn't be asking the legislature to make those decisions. So I want to bring that up because it looks like relief this year is going to be contingent on transit operators doing some very serious things at their own level, at the local level. And then the other thing that was brought up was, well, you maybe should be putting up, especially in the Bay Area, a ballot measure to get funding locally. So with that, I will now turn it over to Mike for the final slide.
Thank you. I'm going to go to public speakers, but just to put in context, we have federal funds. We think we can get through probably 27. It would be a disservice, I believe, for us as a board to defer this problem until the board who happens to be here in 2027. I think that would be irresponsible and not good for the agency that we also care so much about, which is why I think it is really important that we start assessing this in a very sober and very serious way today. Every decision that we make today to smooth this path to 2027 is going to be less drastic and less severe than just punting the problem to a board. Many of us won't be here in 2027, at least not in our current roles and responsibilities. But I don't think it's wise, and I don't think it's appropriate for us to just say, well, they'll figure it out in the future, or some magic thing will happen and everything will make it okay. The second thing, which we all know, because we all deal with budgets in our own jurisdictions and entities, is there are no good options. There are creative things we can do. And I think Member Hilo Rivera highlighted some of those. And ounces make pounds. So just a solution that gets us $500,000 or $1 million is worth exploring, because that is still, that adds up over time. But I think when we look at the options we have, they're all bad. Reducing service is bad. Raising fares is bad. Stepping up enforcement, all of these different things, delaying innovative clean transit projects. And so I think, what we need to start doing is just assessing our own temperature and willingness to begin the efforts in the fiscal year 24 budget for how we start the process of moving. Again, recognizing we don't have to solve it all in the 24 budget. We've got some runway, but everything we do in 24, 25, 26 will help smooth that path into 27. And we can discuss the viability of ballot measure. Look, it was going to be tough in 2020. Now, we thought we had just zero margin for error. Maybe we could get it through and it was worth a shot. The dynamics and environment have changed. That was a period of time where we didn't have a structural deficit. We had increasing ridership. We had a lot of momentum going behind what we were doing. And we certainly had a different economic situation around inflation and cost of living. Post-pandemic, that situation is different, which I think puts a little sobering lens on the prospect of a ballot measure. So again, not to forestall anything, but just to kind of level set. We've got some runway to figure this out, but the more we figure out in 24, 25, 26, the less of a cliff there is in 27 when those federal funds are expired. So with that, let's see if we have any public comments, and then let's go to board member discussion.
We do not, Chair.
Board member comments, start with Member Montgomery.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation, Sharon. Thank you for those additional comments for context, and Chair, thank you for your conclusion. I just want to say a couple of things. I can appreciate what elected officials say in committee meetings, but we say a lot of stuff. And that's why we have lobbyists and we have people that are very focused to present our case. And so I think that if we continue to do that, then, there may be light at the tunnel, there may not be, but I think going in with a message of, we are in need. The state has put a lot of requirements on us to meet certain GHG standards, and it needs to be presented in that context. And so I'm definitely not going to give up on that. I don't think that any of us should or be even discouraged by what we as elected officials say. We say a lot of things and we, I think it's incumbent upon me, I guess, as an MTS board member to, fight whatever fight, we need to at that level, because it's, sometimes there's not as much understanding of what we are going through here. And so I will say that. And then also just with regard to the TDA issues, I really think that the committee that set that task force up in 2018, maybe they were vague about what they wanted, but it should be able to help us in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's why I've been asking to have that discussion, because I think we need to have a workshop. I don't think that one thing necessarily is going to solve all of our problems, but we haven't had an opportunity to look at all of the different ways, all of the different impacts at the same time. And so I'm just thinking, that's kind of in my head what I've wanted to see, so that we can make those hard decisions that we know we had to make. My first vote at Sandag was raising fares. My first vote as an elected official at Sandag was raising fares. So I've done that. So I don't have an issue making a hard decision, but I also don't want to become a city that ignores non-choice riders. And I think that we should do the work in order to make sure that we're putting non-choice riders first. Because what we may become is a city that loves to take people to Comic-Con, but won't take a woman to work. And I don't want to be that. And so whatever we can do in order to, look at all of our options, we know we will have to make some sacrifices, but I would love to be presented with all of those at the same time and some level of hope that, in 2023, that we can do something different. So I just want to add that to the conversation. Appreciate the presentation and all of the work.
Thank you. I agree with that. I think one thing that might be helpful as we work through this in the future is to be able to see it in context of if we're thinking 24, 25, 26, what would some of this look like over a 3-year period? If we did this in 24 and then maybe we do more, start setting some goals for how, projecting out. And I know it's really hard to project that far out, but, as we start thinking about, we're not going to do all of this in one fell swoop. We don't have to, nor should we. But some of these things, and even some of the things that maybe it's a smaller dollar amount that we can get from in 24, but maybe we can grow that in 25 and we grow that in 26 and we'll grow that in 27. Something that's 2 million a year maybe becomes 3, 4, 5. How does that fit in and start, projecting out a path for how by the time we get to 27, we're structurally sound, and then we can make adjustments as we go forward. But I think that would be helpful in the discussion. If we did this change this year, what are the out year implications? Go to member Elo Rivera and then we'll come over to this side.
Thank you, Chair. It was a little, the timing was, or the sequencing a little wonky. I wanted to make sure there was action. That's why I amended the last item, knowing that this was coming. We've had this conversation for a while now. I really do appreciate us beginning to list out options. I think we need to dig deeper, as I mentioned. Just a few things that I will hope to see as we explore this, these ways of addressing the deficit, especially by way of additional revenue. One is, the optimization of the assets that we have. As I mentioned, whether that means advertising, kiosk for retail opportunities. MTS has some very, very valuable property in some areas that are highly trafficked. And if we can leverage that in a way that can bring in some revenue for us and help us serve the folks that Council President Pro Tem just mentioned, I'm certainly interested in that. And then the other thing that I hope we can take a little bit of time to explore. This is related to what Council President Pro Tem said, is we have this incredible positioning as a tourist destination, and I am intrigued by how we can provide kind of choice rides to tourists that can produce revenue that can serve the folks who live and need our transportation. I think that there are transportation options that MTS could provide that can potentially be a moneymaker for this agency that can then offset some of the cost for the folks who need to get to work. I think the Comic-Con example is a really good one. But being creative and leveraging the very literal assets of the agency, and then the less literal but still very real assets of being in San Diego, which is a world-class tourist destination. I hope that those will be things that we look at as we have that revenue strategy conversation down the road. With that, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll go to member Goebel and then member Moreno.
Thank you, Chair. We have a deficit that, well, let me just say, we need to do something radically different than just more of the same. And one of the barriers to transit has often been first mile, last mile. And whether it is a tourist or Councilmember Montgomery Steppe, a non-choice rider, the first mile, last mile is a challenge to get people on. That would get a new audience from those people, as well as those who don't ride transit now. I love the ride share solutions that National City, that Chula Vista have with their Frank and Fred downtown. These are all things that help people get to destination. And I hope perhaps MTS can work with Sandag on this first mile, last mile issue. Maybe they can fund an expanded test of these shuttles or something that it's easier to solve that problem of first mile, last mile. I think that's true for all income levels. Certainly, we're facing a potential recession as Sanday pointed out to the Board of Supervisors a couple of days ago, I believe. And we don't know how that's going to affect our riders. Challenging, I'm a little, I don't know that we're going to be able to hire all the bus drivers we want to because we have competition. The trucking industry is facing a shortage of drivers. Amazon and online merchants are hiring. And those are jobs which don't require you to interact with the public that for some people that's appealing. So I'm hoping we can find a new way to attract drivers because our budget depends on that. We had 47 million passengers on buses in 2019. This year we'll end up with about 33 million-ish. That's a big swing. And to get those riders back, we have to get new riders. And the first mile, last mile, perhaps working with Sandag is a big piece of that solution to me.
I echo that to get more riders is really what we're here for. And we do need to get more riders. And I want to see that. Every rider is subsidized because every trip we rely on tax subsidies and things like that in order to pay for it. So even if we did get new riders onto the system, we're still subsidizing those new riders unless we were able to somehow structure the fares to get 100% of the cost paid for. That really is the only way that getting new riders is going to help us. But that really is our mission, is definitely to carry more riders. And I do want to echo Board Member Montgomery's step in that in the discussions at the state, we really do need to be bold. I do think, and I've echoed this to my colleagues, that we need to be looking at another Transportation Development Act. You know, something that's dedicating funding again to transit operators in the state. Right now, that is kind of off the table with regard to what they're having conversations about within the legislature, but I do echo that that is something that we need to think.
Member Moreno.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. We had, as the budget chair, we had a robust discussion at committee regarding this particular item, and a lot of what was discussed right now at the board, we are going to be dissecting at the committee level. I do want to bring it back though, and just if we look at this data, I'm very encouraged in this presentation. In particular, I'm heartened that we're still showing monthly year-over-year increase in passengers from 20 to 40%. We still have not gotten to the pre-pandemic level, but the tick, as you mentioned in the presentation, it is going up. And just so the record shows, I was in another room watching the presentation. One of the things that we discussed in the budget committee was the fact the state mandates, right? We wanted to see how much money is going towards state mandates that we're just required to do without any help from the state. We also went into the fact that we need to be lobbying. Our lobbyists at MTS need to be lobbying the state legislators for those particular mandates, but just on top in general. And also, I think it's not a secret that the federal government needs to bail out a lot of transit systems in the United States of America. I would argue that MTS is doing really well compared to other transit systems. We're kind of in a bubble right now in the room just focusing on MTS, but if we take a step back, we're doing really, really good compared to other states. So kudos to staff, kudos to Sharon, and kudos to us really. But one of the things that I'm concerned with is if the federal government comes out with some relief, I want to make sure that we are at the front of that table or that line, that we're not at the back just waiting for the leftovers. So once again, looking at our federal lobbyists, but stay in touch at the budget committee, watch it. We're going to have a robust discussion on a lot of these topics, but thank you for the presentation and thank you for the time, Chair.
Thank you. Member Gastel.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of experience with cutting budgets. On the school board, we dealt with 2 significant budget shortfalls. And city council, we dealt with the Great Recession. And one thing I feel pretty strongly about is that you do have to start early. If you see something coming, it is less painful if you start early. And another thing that I think we've learned is that you have to do a variety of things. There isn't you can't just cut service or just find more revenue. And I think that potentially I think a combination of things on the list is likely to work. I don't want to cut service, but I think that it might be it might be better than some of the other options in some cases. But I think that when it comes to service, I think that the thing I feel more strongly about is I don't want to leave people stranded who are depending on us. And so I think that if we did make cuts in service, I'd want to make sure that it's in the areas where people aren't depending on us, where we're not hitting the people that depend on the bus or the trolley the most. And sometimes you do one cut to avoid a different cut. So I think I really want to echo what Councilmember Montgomery Stepp was saying about how we need to be looking out for the people that depend on our transit system. And that's one of the reasons why when it comes to possibly raising fares, I think that it's really important to have an affordable monthly pass. Because if we have an affordable monthly pass, that will be extremely helpful to the people who rely on us to get to work, people with disabilities that can't drive. They're likely to get a monthly pass. And if we keep that affordable, it will make for less damage to the people that really depend on us. And as far as enforcing fare policies, I'm skeptical that we would actually make any money, because I ride the trolley quite a lot and I see people kicked off the trolley. My hunch is that those people just simply wouldn't be on the trolley. You know and that we wouldn't actually be making $8 million. We would have slightly fewer people on the trolley, is my reading of it. There might be some research that shows otherwise, but as far as getting people to pay the fare, I think we're probably doing the smart thing, which is to make it easy to pay the fare, to make it easy and predictable, and so people understand the fare. They're more likely to show up with the proper ticket. That's the kind of the direction I think we want to go with that sort of thing. Kicking people off the trolley is appropriate if they don't have a ticket, but it doesn't get us the trolley revenue. Okay. And deferring capital investments is never a good thing, but that's one of those things where if you do it in small steps, start with the idea that maybe something's going to happen just 1 year later, not put off indefinitely. It's an area where spreading out the damage can make for less damage overall. I would really like to see us seriously consider a ballot measure. And part of the reason is because I don't think we know what the mood is unless we've done recent research. And I also think that we should look at different ideas for attracting support for transit. I think that's worth a look. I think it might be worth a survey to see what support is out there. And not only because a ballot measure might succeed and bring more money, but for another reason, which I've articulated as a council member in my little city, which is that if I'm going to make cuts that affect people and that people really are going to be upset about, I feel better about that if I've given the people an opportunity to pay for the services that they want. In other words, if if we're, if we were in a situation where we'd raise fares or cancel routes that people, like taking, I'd rather do that after we've given them a chance to pay for those things. Because if I have to vote to make cuts, I'd like to be able to say, you know what, we put it to the people and they didn't want to pay for it. And as opposed to just cutting it and people are like, why'd you cut this? We'd like you to pay for it. So part of my thinking is that is serving the public and letting them know that that this is what we can do. This is what it costs. And do we have the support? The final thing is I definitely think that efforts at the state level could be very helpful. And we might want to be part of a coalition that pushes for a statewide ballot measure. The track record on passing taxes is much better at the state level than at any other level. And so being part of a coalition that pushes for a state ballot measure might be the way to go. Thanks for listening.
All right, thank you. Good discussion all around, and certainly something we'll continue to work, and certainly through the budget committee as well. Informational item only, no action for us to take. It is 10:40. We have 2 more informational items. We have 3 closed session items. I think if we can get through these informational items relatively quickly, we can preserve our quorum and go into closed session and keep everyone on track. So we will turn it over to Dennis for item 15. We'll do 15 and 16, and then we will go into closed session.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm joined today by Naomi Woods. She's our senior data analyst, and she is all of the brains behind this report. So our policy 42, board policy 42 has 20 different metrics that we look at multiple times per year to evaluate how our system is doing. That entire report is included as an attachment to the agenda item, but I'm going to go over a few high level things of interest, especially ridership. So our pre-pandemic average weekday ridership was 283,000 in the first 6 months of FY 2020. FY 22, that went down to 169,000, but FY 23, we're actually back up to 215,000. So we're really at about 75% of where we were prior to the pandemic. Some of the trends, obviously, many people are back to work, but they're going back hybrid, so they're not going in every day. That impacts us. We did get a boost from the extension of the Blue Line on the Mid-Coast, which opened in the middle of FY 22. And then, as Sharon had mentioned, our riders on the commuter bus services have really been the slowest to return. We're still at only about 40% of pre-pandemic. So that's a service where we haven't restored everything from the pandemic cuts. Our outlook for the rest of the year, our ridership does continue to rebound. We're seeing year over year ridership each month increasing by anywhere from 20 to 40%. So we don't feel it stabilized yet. We're not at a new normal. We're still growing. So that's really a positive sign. As has been mentioned multiple times today, we did adjust some services a couple times throughout 2022 to account for our driver shortage. The total passengers we're projecting will be about 70 million this year. For the first 6 months, we had just over 34 million, which again is a 27% increase over the previous year. So that's positive news. We saw good growth in actually all different bus and rail categories, with the exception of express bus. We did discontinue 2 express bus lines when Mid-Coast went in, so you'll see a reduction there. But overall, really good growth on the rest of them. We're up to an average for the first 6 months of FY 23 to 215,000 riders per year. And we're seeing a lot of days where we're actually doing 245,000 riders per year, per weekday. And just to note, point of reference, April 10th, 2020 was our lowest ridership day, maybe ever, when we were at 75,000 riders. So we've come a long way since the depths of the pandemic. This is the weekday average by week. I'm sorry, it's by month, but it's the monthly weekday average. So again, April 2020 was our low point, 83,000 average weekday riders, now up to 245,000 in October, with some seasonal dips since then, so that will come back up. There's a lot of information on this chart, but I think the important thing is the blue bars are the pre-pandemic FY19, and then red is FY20. So you can see we're doing really well. We were above the blue bars until we hit March, and then everything really crashed down. So those red bars towards the right of the chart were the last few months of FY20, and we've been growing back since then. So now we're in the orange bars, and you can see we're slowly crawling our way back up to where we were in the blue. Our passengers per revenue hour is one of our primary efficiency metrics. This is how many riders we're carrying for the amount of service that we're putting out on the street. This varies, of course, by service type, but overall, we were at about 18 for buses, 18 passengers per hour for buses. And that is up from 14 last year, and then lower than 10 in FY21. So we're coming back up. This has been helped by not only the increasing ridership, but because we did reduce service levels a little bit in FY20, that's brought this metric up a little bit as well. On-time performance is really normalizing back to pre-pandemic levels as traffic has come back. Construction projects have restarted. Everything's normalizing in that sense. So you see our on-time performance, we were up at almost 90% overall in the depths of the pandemic, and that's back down to about 85%. That's really our goal for our urban services, the urban frequent and rapid, and then a little bit lower than our 90% goal for other services. So that's a very high level view. Again, the full report is included as an attachment to the agenda item, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Do we have any public speakers in this item?
We do not, Chair.
All right. Not seeing any board member comments or discussions. Thank you. Appreciate it. Let's roll into item 16, Pronto fare system update. I know item we spent a fair amount of time on executive committee, and I know the full board will be interested to see this presentation.
Right. Good morning. My name is Israel Maldonado. I'm the Director for Technology and Operations. I'm flanked to my left by Mark Olson, Director of Marketing, and flanked to my right by Christine Ortiz, Deputy Fare System Administrator. So today we have a Pronto update for you. We'll get started right away. On the agenda, Mark will touch on the successful launch, challenges and solutions with tapping and scanning on the trolley. We'll talk about open payments and the minimum viable product and the associated timeline. With that, Mark.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Israel. So one of the things I wanted to get into, and we talked about this with executive committee last week, was some of the challenges that we have and issues that we're facing with tapping and scanning on the trolley system. We're not experiencing this on the bus system, but it's specifically dedicated to the trolley. You can see in this graph here the number of validations that we get, and the validations are somebody tapping or scanning their Pronto card or the app on one of our validators while they're on the trolley platform. We're at about a 1-to-3 ratio. So our ridership is about 3 million passengers on the trolley per month. And the taps that we're actually getting before people are boarding to collect that fare is about 1 million. So it's certainly significantly lower than we'd like. You know, I think we anticipated when we launched there would be some gap, but it wouldn't be as significant as it is today. What it's costing us is about $500,000 per month, or about $6 million per year. So it is certainly something that we want to address as soon as we possibly can. And so we have some things in place to go ahead and do that. Next slide, Israel. Just some of the challenges that we've assessed, with this situational analysis here is that, we have an open system on the trolley. So there is no turnstile, there is no gate that people need to go through before they actually tap their product and we can collect that fare. Another thing that we're looking at is a new behavior. With our old system Compass, it wasn't required for us to collect that fare when people tapped or scanned their product. It is something that is kind of new to our passengers to be able to collect that, but we need to collect that through them using the validator and having that behavior for us to collect that fare revenue on the trolley. Ticket vending machines, you can't actually tap or scan your product on the ticket vending machine before you board. And so what we've seen with that is that validators are on both ends of the platform, and it's basically a two-step process where you have to purchase your product or purchase your fare from the actual ticket vending machine, then go and activate it at the actual validator. So there's a couple of steps that people need to take, and we have some solutions that Israel is going to get into to address that. We also have a compassionate approach to our fare enforcement policy, and then also message fatigue. I think as you can see on the bulkhead of the trolley here, when people enter the trolley, we do have a Pronto message there that we're going to change to tapping and scanning, but you can see there's also 3 competing messages up there, and they're all important. They're safety related messages, they're public service announcements. So they all have a different purpose, but there is a lot of ways, things out there that are on our system that we try to communicate to our passengers, and tapping or scanning is one additional one that we need to do. Next slide. So our strategy moving forward of what we want to do, and Israel will talk a little bit about this as well, is that we're going to move to a stronger messaging approach out there on our system. Before we were more like earn a pass, because you never have to pay more than a day pass in a day or a monthly pass in a month with the stored value function that we have. But we want to just be more direct, where we need you to tap or scan. You must tap or scan, or tapping and scanning is required before boarding. So we're going to go down there, go out and audit all of our messages and just make sure we have a more direct approach with tapping and scanning. We're also looking at expanding, the existing communications that we have out there. We do have a lot of places where we're telling people to tap and scan, but like I said, there's a lot of messages out there. So where else can we put messages that's maybe unique about tapping or scanning? And so we're looking at some options there that we're going to implement in the immediate future. And then the use of emerging technology. I think one of the great things about the Pronto fare system is that it's adaptable and it's flexible, and we can do new things with it that we couldn't do with the old system. And so we're using that to our advantage to try to reduce this gap of people tapping and scanning versus the amount of trips that people are taking. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Israel to go into some of those items.
So I get the cool slide. I get to talk about improvements. One of these that will hit the streets very, 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 it's actually hit the streets so soon that it's in place. It's the additional ticket vending machines to Snapdragon. We went from 2, now 8. So this will definitely help customers when leaving special events. They'll have more access points as they leave the games. Validation capability. This one is particularly critical because it'll help us do multiple things. Provide over 170 points of contact for customers to tap their card, a physical card, to validate their fare, and it'll also help us recoup some of that revenue. So that's coming also very soon, as soon as April. In-app messaging. So we have a Pronto app, very successful, lots and lots of downloads. We're going to add a feature that would allow marketing teams from both MTS and our partners to the North NCTD to better reach our customers through messaging. Things like tapping and scanning and reminding them to tap, amongst other campaigns to come in the future that will be available in June of this year. We're also exploring a new concept. How do we further incentivize our customers to continue to tap? And so we're exploring an innovative concept with the Rider Rewards program. More to come there. And now, of course, open payment. A lot of work has been done over the past several months in collaboration with multiple groups, and we'll talk more about it today. So open payments, in a nutshell, what is it? It's as simple as a customer tapping on a validator with their physical credit card or their mobile wallet on their mobile device. There are no menus. There are no products to select. They simply tap on the reader, and the reader charges the corresponding fare that is programmed. This means that customers would be able to leverage not only their physical credit card, but mobile wallets like Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay. How do we arrive at this minimum viable product? We held over 5 large-scale workshops. These were expedited in a little bit over 2 months. It included participants from MTS, North County Transit District, our merchant services providers, JP Morgan Chase, NMI, Init, our first system provider, our consulting group, Jacobs, and the California Integrated Travel Project, CalITP. This particular group, CalITP, has been focusing on advancing open payment standards statewide and also nationally in discussing not only standards, but interchange fees, which are part of the fee of paying for open payment. The goal of these meetings were to identify a minimum set of attributes necessary to implement the solution. Of course, while this is available for every single rider to utilize, it does provide an enhanced experience immediately for casual and special event riders that are not familiar with Pronto, but do have a credit card. Most, if not all, events in San Diego are now credit card only at these venues. So they're used to having a credit card on their pocket. So the minimum viable product. We're currently exploring 2 options. The first, each one-way fare, each tap on a validator would deduct a one-way fare inclusive of a 2-hour transfer and would qualify for daily capping. The second option involves a day pass equivalent $6 fare being deducted upon that first tap. They each have their pros and cons. On the first option, we would require the customer to tap multiple times throughout the day because it is a one-way fare, and after 2 hours, it requires another tap. The second option would make it more efficient. 1 tap, $6, they wouldn't have to tap again. Reduced fares, there is a caveat there. Reduced fares with open payment would be excluded from this phase. Keeping in mind, open payment as a concept is not trying to replace the benefits of the closed loop Pronto program. Similar to Starbucks, if you want the additional rewards of the Starbucks program, you use the Starbucks closed loop component. And for Pronto, you would use the Pronto closed loop benefit card. But it is not the only challenge, and Christine will speak a little bit more about that.
Thank you. So one of the challenges with implementing open payments is regardless of the fare structure that we would be charging, is that we need to be able to inspect the bank cards that are used as part of the tap and ride validation in order to limit fare evasion as much as possible. And again, as Israel mentioned, this is unique because these are bank cards. They're not part of our closed loop system. So they're issued by banks and credit card issuers such as Visa and MasterCard. So these groups, Visa, MasterCard, have created a set of standards, or that's known as the Payment Card Industry, PCI, standards and compliance that we are working with. So transit agencies that offer open payments are faced with similar challenges in accessing PCI certified hardware and software in order to inspect open payment transactions and purchases. So our approach consists of a phased plan to limit the impact to the schedule, part of that minimum viable product, but also mitigating fare evasion as much as possible. Our phase 1 approach would be to purchase an adapter that would go onto our existing fare inspection devices that are already with our security and inspectors. And this adapter would allow the device to securely read the bank card and offer limited information to the inspector about the bank card transactions on our system specifically in order to protect the person's information. However, that specific adapter device is not yet ready or certified to actually authorize payment, which is what we call the validation process, or if they did find that during inspection they had evaded the fare, that they would not be able to actually charge at that point on that specific device. So that goes into our phase 2 improved enhancement to that open payment inspection process would be to then go that next level and be able to charge the fare as needed during the inspection process. So with that, that takes us to our procurement and implementation timeline. So from NTP, The timeline to be able to launch is roughly a 9-month time frame. And that includes the additional software development time across the various modules and components of Pronto. It includes the merchant services agreements and discussing and finalizing those additional fees that would be part of that. Onboarding the additional 1,000 to 1,000 validation points of our validators across the system with certifications and such. And then aiming to launch by March 2024. So with that, that concludes our brief presentation today on open payments.
Thank you. Do we have any public speakers?
We do. We have several. Sally, please unmute yourself now.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sally Small. I'm a D4 resident of Monica Montgomery Steps in Emerald Hills. I've been a rider of the public transit since '73. I still struggle sometimes because I can tap as much as I like and it doesn't go through. So the technical issues still exist, but I am happy that you're trying to get the open payment system. But please do make it the one-way fare with the 2-hour transfer for those of us who only take short trips. And for those of us that can afford a full day pass or might be getting a ride at the other end, it makes sense for it to just be the one-way fare. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Connor Proctor, please unmute yourself now.
Hi, I'm Connor Proctor. I'm a co-founder of RideSD. It's a newer organization advocating for better transit experience in San Diego. For those of you who don't know, RideSD was born out of an open letter last year asking MTS to support tap to pay with credit cards and mobile phone wallets with its open payment system. That letter was signed by over 100 people because it's something that San Diegans really want. And we also believe that it will help MTS with a lot of problems that you guys are worried about. Most San Diegans don't have a Pronto pass, and by adding credit card tap to pay, it removes a huge barrier to entry and significantly reduces friction for all these residents who don't have a Pronto pass to use transit. This is what you need to do if you want to increase ridership. This is what you need to do if you need to mode shift San Diegans towards using transit and away from cars. The Pronto pass takes over 150 clicks to sign up for, compared to 15 for Uber. And for me personally, this has turned out to be a significant barrier to entry to get my friends to ride the bus. Tap to pay would just make it so easy. We've heard MTS and the board are worried about tap rates on the trolley, and this should help because it's something that people are familiar with. It improves operational efficiency by making it quicker for people to board the bus. Tapping is a lot faster than dealing with the janky QR codes in the Pronto app. Vancouver, New York, London, and even Portland, which is the city that we base our fare system on, have this in place, and it works amazingly well if you've ever been to those cities. I would like to thank the staff for working hard to come up with options that can be rolled out quickly. I think it's fantastic that you're working on doing a minimum viable product to get this out as soon as possible. But of the two options provided, I think it's really, really important that you go with option one, which is the charging a one-way fare with daily fare capping. If you do it with option two of charging a full day pass in the first tap, I think that's really unfair, and it's going to be a significantly inferior option that will hurt adoption, because I do a lot of one-way trips. I know a lot of people who do one-way trips, especially with like the infrequency problems, like you end up coming home a different way, or even a round trip is less than a day pass. And so if you force people to pay a full day pass, it's unfair to them. They aren't going to do it. They're going to avoid it. It's also very consistent with Pronto cards. We've heard about wanting to keep messaging simple. We've heard about wanting to keep messaging simple. If MTS can just say tap your Pronto card app or credit card or mobile wallet every time you board, that's really simple. If you have to like say, oh, like the credit card's different from how you tap the Pronto app, it's gonna really muddle the messaging and hurt payments. Thank you. Would love
Leaf Gensert, please unmute yourself now.
Yeah, hi, my name is Leif Gensert. I'm also a member of Ride SD, and I have a lot of experience with traveling with MTS, and I've been a avid transit rider for the last 15 years in other cities. I lived for 2 years in London, and I can attest that even in London, where they also have an equivalent to Pronto, lots and lots of people use their debit and credit card, even if they do daily trips. They go to work every day using their credit card. I echo the two previous speakers about moving forward with MVP option 1. Another angle to that is if you have tourists coming for Comic-Con and other events, and if you charge them a day pass on the first tap, you might give them the impression that a single ride in San Diego costs $6, which is not true, and it's hard to reverse, but it is hard to counter this kind of impression. So I fully support the MVP option 1, a tapping, a single ride, and a day capping.
Henry Agnew, please unmute yourself now.
Hello, my name is Henry Agnew. It's good to hear all the updates that are being planned to the Pronto system, both with the stronger messaging and new technologies. One highly related feature that Israel previously mentioned in November, and by some of the other commenters, but was not part of today's, or was not explicitly listed on today's roadmap, is the virtual Pronto card, so that you can tap to pay with your phone instead of using the QR code barcode in the app. Being able to have the virtual Pronto card, as previously discussed, that I can tap with my phone instead of the QR code would be more reliable, especially given the outage with the Pronto app barcodes last Wednesday, March 8th, that was quite disruptive. This outage was mentioned by the official SDMTS Twitter on that day. And at least for me, the outage meant that the QR code in the app wasn't working. I couldn't use my bus pass or try to load fares. And instead I had to tap my physical backup Pronto card that I happened to carry with me that luckily I still had funds on. And then lastly, this tap to phone feature, which it would work well with the other feature talked about today about being able to validate on the ticket vending machine, which would be possible by tapping a physical Pronto card or a virtual Pronto card on your phone. But as far as I've seen, it won't be able to support barcodes. So that will be an improvement. And I am curious if the ticket vending machines will also be able to validate open payments once the open payments are also released in a year. Thank you, and I'm excited for these upcoming changes.
John Anderson, please unmute yourself now.
Hi, I'm John Anderson, also a member of Ride SD and a resident of Hillcrest. I want to echo others in support of option 1 for all the reasons stated, consistent messaging and support for one-way trips or just a round trip. But I won't rehash any others. Option 1 is the way to go for sure.
Karina Contreras, please unmute yourself now.
Yes, hello, Karina Contreras, Transportation Policy Advocate for Climate Action Campaign. Some really amazing public comments. Thank you to MTS staff for moving forward with allowing folks to tap to get onto their ride. It's really important. I want to just let everybody know that at North County Transit District, they had a presentation regarding the Pronto updates, and one of them is to be able to tap your virtual Pronto card. The changes that are going to be made, especially when it comes to trying to increase messaging within the app, it'll be critical for folks to have more, a larger pool of folks that are using a virtual Pronto card in order to do that. And I wanted to offer, as we're talking about mode shift and trying to get more folks less barriers to entry onto the MTS system. When it comes to families that want to ride the system, is there a possibility for there to be a way to manage your wallet so that you could put maybe, your youth opportunity passes on there for your kids? And it could be an easy way for families to have one tap to enter. As we're trying to expand ridership and grow revenue from that ridership, that could be a really important transition to make it seamless for families to travel. And that would help with, possibly there's even a discount for families. You just want to be as cost competitive to driving a vehicle as possible. And I think there's a way to get there, and there's a way to make it very competitive, where folks are able to pay less to get where they need to go, but you're still able to collect a lot of revenue to ensure a long-standing reliability in the MTS system. Thank you very much for taking a look at moving forward with this innovation. And I would say that the day pass probably isn't the best option to start off with the MVP. That one trip pass is probably the best for the tap feature. Thank you so much.
Chair, that concludes public comment.
All right, thank you. Any board member comments or discussions? Appreciate it. Look forward to Member Goebel.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. One of the things we talk about carrots and sticks. The sticks is the enforcement part. We've had discussions about that, but let's talk about the carrots for a second, because I asked staff how much is in stored value on Pronto now, and it's a little over $5 million of people's money is stored on Pronto cards and we're finding people aren't tapping all the time. So it's not a great use. Council President Eler, you talk about outside vendors. That's a great opportunity. What on the marketing side can we do? Prizes each month. We randomly select from all Pronto users that month. And then there are vendors who would love to get in front of our customers, and they provide the prizes. That's an incentive to tap for sure. The more times you tap, the more entries you have in that contest. On the loyalty side, for every nth number of ride, you get this prize provided by a vendor at no cost to MTS. So I think we can partner with vendors who have desire to get in front of our riders at no cost to us as an incentive, a carrot to do more tapping and riding.
Very good point. All right. Thank you all. Appreciate the presentation. We'll continue to work. I have nothing to update on Chair's report. I'll go to Sharon.
Yeah,
CEO's
just a
report.
quick one. Tomorrow is National Transit Driver Appreciation Day. This is a chance for us all across the nation to really thank the people who have gotten us to where we need to be, get to our schools and to helping to communicate how to get around the county. So we're doing a bunch of different things. We'll be catering lunches for the operators. We will be giving them thank you notes. There'll be banners up at their workplace. We're also putting out a big push on social media tomorrow. So I would love it if you have time, if you could retweet or whatever platform you prefer. And then Mike Wygant, Brian Riley, and I will be walking around to thank the operators in their workplace tomorrow. So if any of you are interested, we'd love to have you. And so you can speak to me and I can help coordinate that. But it's one of the best parts of the job is to be able to actually be there with the workforce and then to show your appreciation. So thank you.
Thank you. Any board member communications? Not seeing any. Do we have any additional requests for public speakers?
We do not, Chair.
All right. With that, we will recess into closed session. Thank you all.
Reporting out of closed session, item number 21, closed session conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation. In the case of Christine Hall versus San Diego Metropolitan Transit System, the board approved a mediator's proposal to settle this litigation case for $225,000. The vote was approved with 12 members voting yes and 3 members absent. The yes votes were Councilmember Bush, Councilmember Chavez, Councilmember Donovan, Councilmember Elo Rivera, Chair Fletcher, Councilmember Frank, Councilmember Gastel, Councilmember Moreno, Councilmember Goebel, Councilmember Cardenas, Councilmember Montgomery Stepp, and Vice Chair Whitburn. The absent members were Councilmember Dillard, Hall, and Lepa Gonzalez. Reporting out on closed session item number 22, closed session conference with real property negotiators related to the 5801 and 5805 Fairmont Avenue property. The board received a report from negotiators and gave instructions. And on the closed session, item number 23, conference with real property negotiators related to the 9805 Prospect Avenue and 8547 Cuyamaca Street properties. The board received a report and gave instructions to negotiators. This meeting is now adjourned.